Thanks, Reed, and thank you all so much for being here together with me. I am looking at my Pavillon walking stick, which is really special to me. That was a lovely memento that was gifted me during my tour of Pavillon, and I'm just really grateful for you all to be here and that stick to remind me of the space that Pavillon offers when it's a little bit more peaceful in our lives, right? So my name is Stephanne Thornton. I am a clinical social worker and a master addiction counselor, and I suffer from overwhelm, and I didn't realize it because it took a lot of slaps in the face for me to recognize what was going on in my life and how to name that as overwhelm. And so the first thing that I kind of want to draw our attention to as a grounding principle is this New Yorker cartoon, because when I saw it for the first time, it really spoke to me. I was looking at it and I thought, yeah, that feels like my day in and day out. Feed me, fill me, clean me, check me, pick me up, clear me, defrost me, do all of these things, and you haven't even gotten in the door. You haven't even been able to take a deep breath and take your shoes off, put your purse down, or put your keys down. All of the tasks and chores and responsibilities start piling up right away. So for me, this story of overwhelm began, in the early days of the pandemic, and I think most of us were thinking about overwhelm in the days of the pandemic. But like I said, we'll get to the fact that I didn't recognize it, because overwhelm for tonight's talk is going to be about the negative impacts of overwhelm, not the positive. And I do want to couch the fact that overwhelm as an idea, as a term, as a concept, can be anything as good as it can be or as bad as it can be. There's really something that happens, something that occurs in your life, something that just takes your breath away. Could be a sunset that makes you cry. I was at an event last month, and someone that I know professionally who's done a certain kind of work for 40 years was finally getting recognized for the work that she's done and the trailblazer that she is. And I just started crying. It was overwhelmed that I was experiencing. It was joy. I was so pleased and relieved and proud of her that I just couldn't contain it. Tears started coming out. That's not the kind of overwhelm we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about overwhelm as a negative, dysfunctional, problematic concept. That fact that, as this says, you're beset by intense emotion, and it's difficult to manage, and it can affect different aspects of your life, whether it's your ability to think or act rationally. And it also prevents you from performing daily tasks. So your functioning is not logical, it's not linear, it's not clear, it's not methodical, it's just kind of scattershot. And so that's the overwhelm that we're going to talk about. So for me, I mentioned that during the pandemic, I started to build up this experience, this umbrella idea of overwhelm, and I didn't realize it at the time. And so my husband, when we were experiencing the pandemic, we were experiencing it separately. He was teaching at one location, and I was working from home. And the reason that we were doing that is he was around students, and I was taking care of my elderly parents. They were octogenarians, and my father had COPD and emphysema. And I was working from home, so I was very, very protective and very, very scared of exposing either one of them to any kind of COVID risk, knowing that it would kill my father. So I'm working from home and trying to take care of them and trying to manage all the things that we were doing during COVID while working from home. And when we were able to finally start getting back out, things started getting a little bit more routinized. I started going to the grocery store, but I was still terrified. And I would meet my husband at the grocery store, and I would mask up, I'd lacquer up with hand sanitizer, I would get my gloves, I'd be ready, and I would go into the store, and instead of being methodical and clear with my path and my plan, because I had a list, I would dart around waiting for some kind of saber-toothed tiger to jump out of the tomato sauce shelf, or something was going to come get me. and I was just darting around and terrified, looking around everywhere. And my husband said, "You're like a grocery store ninja. You're constantly looking for danger. You're constantly looking for what's going to come get you." And that's how I felt. And I didn't realize it until on 3 separate occasions, I went into the grocery store each time trying to buy cumin, and I came out with cinnamon every single time. And after the 3rd time, I had my 3rd jar of cinnamon. I thought, what is going on here? Because I still don't have cumin and something's happening. I'm a smart person. I can do the grocery store, but I knew that something inside of me was a little bit off. And what happened was that experience of stress, of fear of a virus that you couldn't see, that was spread in public, a public health disease, and then the threat of bringing it back to my parents and potentially harming them was so much of a fear and so overwhelming that my thought process was broken. I had disjointed thoughts and I couldn't think in a clear, linear way. I couldn't process information without looking for a threat. And it was almost like an out-of-body experience. So that was my experience at the grocery store while working from home. But then, after working from home for a period of time, we have to go back. And we were returning to work as if everything was back to normal, right? We were masked and we were distancing, but it was back to work as usual. And I thought that was okay. I thought that I had transitioned well. I thought I had handled the pandemic pretty well. What I didn't recognize, though, was that red flag of the grocery store incident wasn't the only red flag that I should have been picking up on. What I realized was while I was working from home, I was taking on more and more tasks, more and more projects. I was creating new work to fill up my time. At the same time, I was taking care of my parents, and I didn't have the same support from my husband because him staying away was actually the way that we were trying to take care of my parents. So when I thought I was handling things well by being on a Zoom call with, I remember it was with Georgetown Law School, we were working on a project and I turned my video off to go upstairs and meet the EMS workers who were coming to check on my father who wasn't able to breathe. Got them settled, got my dad settled on the gurney, went back downstairs and did the Zoom call to completion. I thought I was handling it. I thought I had it all fine until I got back to the office and realized that all of these projects, all of these emotional and physical stressors, all of these strains that I had built in for the time that I'd been working from home, all of the fears had actually started to sink into my bones. And I had to take a nap in my car for 15 minutes before I could even drive home at the end of the workday. That's when I realized, oh, there's something that's happening here. There's a shift that's happening. It's not just the pandemic, it's overwhelm. And like the quote says, our typical response to ever-growing workload is to work harder and put in longer hours rather than to step back and examine what makes us do this and find a new way of operating. Red flag for me, because rather than taking a step back, I was like, I'm just going to do more. I'm just going to take care of it. I'll just take a nap and then I'll drive home. But let's translate this to recovery. Think about when someone is either new in recovery or early in recovery and they're on fire and they're so excited and they think, this is great. I'm going to make up for lost time. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to see all the people. I'm going to make all the connections. I'm going to start my living amends right now, and I'm going to go big. I'm going to go with a lot of breadth, and it's going to be great. And so they start saying yes and yes, please to everything. And they take on more and more and more and more and more. And when you start to take on so much, that workload grows and grows and grows, and what gets in the way? Well, your personal recovery starts getting in the way because all of these other things that you're trying to catch up on that are good, that are service related, they end up becoming things that you have to do, things that are work and task to do, and you spend so much time on that, then you're not really focused on your early recovery. Later in recovery, same thing happens. You get further and further away from your personal recovery because of all the things, all the tasks, all the activities that you're taking care of. And so it's harder to get to that 7 o'clock meeting, or it's harder to get to that Saturday morning meeting because you've got to mow the lawn, or you've got to take your kids somewhere, or you've got to do some other social event, or you've got to take care of family members. And so it becomes really hard when you take on all those responsibilities to really internalize that and focus it back on yourself, when really we need to take that step back and find a new way of operating. So what's happening in our brains when we're doing these things, when we're doing these tasks, when, for example, I was in the grocery store buying cinnamon 3 times instead of cumin, is I had a high level of stress. And that high level of stress is my amygdala increasing in density, saying, it's almost like it's a swollen sponge, saying everything in your environment could cause you harm, could cause you threat, could cause you death. And so you need to be on high alert for that. You need to be hyper vigilant and looking out for that. And so your amygdala's increased density becomes so profound and so overwhelming that it tells our prefrontal cortex, which is the supervisory part of the brain that says, make good decisions, don't run out into traffic, don't Zoom bomb, don't do anything dumb, be thoughtful, be logical, be appropriate in public. Well, the amygdala says to the prefrontal cortex, you can't be appropriate in public if something is going to kill you. You need to look for the danger too. And so the amygdala connects with the prefrontal cortex and says, danger is out there, we have to be aware, we have to look for it. What happens is the prefrontal cortex starts only looking for danger. It doesn't start to make good decisions. It doesn't start to be thoughtful or methodical. It's only looking for that risk in the environment. And so the stress cycle increases. Then the amygdala wrangles in the left hippocampus, which is responsible for moodiness and irritability, which seems like, well, how does that really have to do with stress and overwhelm? Well, let me give you an example. If you're so stressed and so overwhelmed and you've got so much on your plate that all you can do is focus on the next task at hand, you want to shut people down and get them out of your way so you can go back to work. The best, easiest way to do that is to snap at them, to be grumpy, to be irritable, to shut them down verbally. And so you're really short-tempered because, one, you've got a lot on your plate, but two, if you get people out of your way, all those social connections out of your way, all that, side talk, then you can get back to the task at hand, and that perpetuates the stress, and that helps in your mind try to reinforce the work that you're trying to create, which is just exacerbating the overwhelm. In the grocery store example again, I was jumping around all over the place. I couldn't figure out how to get what I needed because I was darting around. My mind was not linear, it wasn't logical, it wasn't thoughtful. That's because my default mode network, which is another part of my brain that works collaboratively, one, for daydreaming, which is great, but two, for logical linear processes. So it's that checklist of, I'm going to do this first, and then I'm going to do this next, and then I'm going to do this third thing. That goes offline when our stress level is so high. And our stress level is high again because our amygdala is telling our prefrontal cortex, there is danger, we have to look for it. So the default mode network is like, well, if there's danger, then I don't want to daydream because daydreaming is going to cause me to die, and I don't want to die. So no longer do you daydream, but also no longer do you go through that task list. No longer do you go through that checklist of, I need to do this first, and this next, and this next. Instead, it turns those thoughts to, you're not good enough. You can't accomplish things. If you were better, if you were stronger, if you were braver, you wouldn't be in this situation. And so that feeds the feelings of overwhelm, because eventually with overwhelm, we think that we're a fraud. We think that we're not able to accomplish all the tasks. Everyone else is able to do it, but we're not, because we're not naming it as overwhelm either. We're feeling it as an experience without naming it. And then finally, if this lasts for long enough, if it persists for a long period of time, it can have a longer term effect on the gray matter in our temporal parietal junction. And what that means is that self-doubt, that negative self-talk really starts to become ingrained. And so instead of just thinking, oh, I can't accomplish this, we think we're hopeless, we're helpless, we're losers, we're not able to do anything, and clearly we're not cut out for this work. It becomes so persistent that it's really hard to fight back from. It is possible to fight back from it, but it starts to become part of who you see yourself as. So when your brain is experiencing all of these things collaboratively and collectively, this is what's happening when you're overwhelmed. And I hope you can see how it feeds into one and the other of these neuronal systems, because it's this effort to look for danger because we feel like we're under threat, because we're seeing stress and experiencing stress everywhere. And then that turns into, we can't relax, we're on edge, we're pushing people away, and eventually we think poorly of ourselves because we just can't do it all. So these are some of the psychological stress symptoms associated with overwhelm. Obviously, we know when we're overwhelmed, but we may not want to acknowledge it, or we may not want to recognize it. I wasn't willing to recognize it. I was like, I'm just busy, or I'm just trying to keep up with things, or COVID's taking a toll. But I was waking up in the middle of the night and I was worrying about things that I hadn't done. I was under stress and strain. I wasn't happy. I was having a difficult time concentrating. I wasn't enjoying normal activities, things that I did for leisure. I just wasn't doing them. I didn't feel like I was enough. I didn't feel like I was competent. I was losing confidence in myself. I wasn't able to be solution focused and face up the problems. I could make decisions, but I would second guess those decisions. And sometimes I would be delayed in making those decisions. I would also think that I wasn't really part of the bigger picture and I wasn't important. I wasn't making a big difference. And that caused me to start thinking that, maybe my contributions aren't great. And that gets into that negative self-talk. So all of these are formal signs of overwhelm. But then there are some informal signs of overwhelm too. Feeling panicked, that fuzzy head, out of body feeling, brain fog. If you're feeling like you're distressed or under stress, holding your breath or feeling short of breath, feeling like you're under threat or feeling at risk, feeling cynical or negative, like nothing's going to make a difference, being tired down to your bones, trudging like you're moving through quicksand, like everything's just a big effort, and then feeling like you're in over your head. All of these are also experiences of overwhelm. There are 3 general triggers that tend to fuel our overwhelm. Now, certainly there are a lot of triggers in our life. Obviously the pandemic was one, family pressures can be another, financial constraints can be another, other work strains can be another, but these are 3 different triggers that, if not fed, they can lead to our overwhelm. And they fall into the category of lack of capacity, lack of creativity, and lack of agency. And so our overwhelm can be caused by a number of things, that the heart of it is one of these things typically. And so lack of capacity is, you've got the ability to do something and you've taken on so much that you just don't physically have time to do anymore. There are not enough hours in the day, there are not enough days in the week, not enough weeks in the year for you to actually accomplish all that you've taken on. Now this goes hand in hand with people pleasing, which we'll get to soon. But the idea is there's just not enough of you to accomplish those things. So that can be a trigger for overwhelm. Lack of creativity can come from doing the same things in a routinized way day in and day out, and not feeling like you can put your personal touch on it. You can't put your personal spin on it. And so instead of finding that spark, instead of finding that energy that lets you put your stamp on something, you just feel mired down in routine. You feel so overwhelmed by all the sameness. It's almost like going into a beige housing complex and everything looks the same and you just get lost. That lack of creativity becomes overwhelming and you don't know how to get out of it. You don't know how to break free. And then finally, lack of agency. And that's the time that we feel trapped in a situation because we feel stuck. We feel like we can't claim our space. We can't break the cycle because we just don't have the space or the ability to do something. We don't have the autonomy to do something. We can't stand up for ourselves. And so it becomes overwhelming because you become so quiet, so meek, so in that corner that you can't break out of that. And everything gets piled on you over and over and over again because you're not standing up for yourself. I think about folks that suffer from imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome. And that's a syndrome where you really do lack agency. You feel like you're not good enough, so you take on more and more and more responsibilities to try to prove yourself, rather than saying, no, I'm good enough. I can do this. I have merit. I have worth. I belong here. I deserve a seat at the table. But we don't stand up for ourselves in those situations. And so that lack of agency is what causes the overwhelm to keep happening over and over and over again because we don't stand up. So how does this relate to our neuronal makeup, our epigenetics, and what's going on in our body? So we talked a little bit about the brain and what's going on in the brain system, but this is really looking at whether or not the triggers are connected to something inside of our systems and across generations. And the reason I want to bring this up is because there is research that shows individuals that have experienced adversity and difficulty in childhood tend to have a poor stress response in adulthood. And that poor stress response can actually be passed down from generation to generation to generation. That can also be a systemic oppression that gets passed down from generation to generation to generation, whether it's racism or classism and poverty that's been experienced. The ability to deal with that and cope with that can get passed down through generations. Well, how does that have to do with overwhelm? Well, there was a study done by Joan Kaufman. She's the director of the Child and Adolescent Research and Education Program at Yale Medical School. And she wanted to see the stress responses as they were passed down to generations of children over time. And what she did was she looked at children that experienced some kind of adversity in childhood and were taken away from their parents. And that could have been abuse, that could have been verbal abuse or disregard or maltreatment or neglect or something. But these children were removed from the home, and she swabbed the saliva and ran the DNA of all of those children. And what she found was, out of all of those children that were removed from the home, there were almost 3,000 sites on their DNA, as well as 23 chromosomes that showed some kind of difference because of what happened to them in childhood. And then when she continued to study this group of children, she found out that the gene responsible for calming down their internal alarm system in stress response, the gene that was responsible for saying it's going to be okay, this is not really a dangerous situation, you need to calm down, take a deep breath, take a step back, that gene was broken. And that gene being broken had the potential of being passed down to other generations as well. And so what she found was what happens in childhood when it's adversity, when it's harm, when it's difficulty, if it's not properly resolved, then it can get remembered on the genetic scale. It can get remembered in the neurons, and that prevents us from being able to respond appropriately and accurately to stress in adulthood. And so if we're not learning how to deal with stress, and then our genes are also not responding to stress and calming us down in the face of stress, then we're already prone to new stress responses. It makes sense that you would look for danger in your environment because your genes never calm down to begin with. You've kind of been on high alert since childhood. Now, certainly not everyone that experiences overwhelm had bad things happen to them in childhood. That's not at all what I'm saying, but there is a proneness and a connection for individuals that had some kind of adversity in childhood where it was unresolved and they continued to experience stress later on, to be more prone to overwhelm because those stress responses are constantly triggered. Those stress responses and the ability to manage those stress responses are constantly at play, and it's harder to manage those even in adulthood. Then throw in vicarious trauma or secondary traumatic stress. So a lot of us do work around people that tell us their stories. And those stories are really tough, and those stories are really hard to hear. I work in and around lawyers in West Virginia and across the country, and I know that when they're handling certain cases, it's really hard to hear the stories of the people that they're representing. Even if it's a civil matter, it's really tough to hear some of those stories because people come to you with what happened to them, not focusing on the legal case at hand, but the experience that they want to get across. They want to tell you their tale. They want to be heard. And when they come to you with these tales and these horrible things that happened to them, or the tough parts of their life that happened to them, we listen. We're connecting with them in a really intentional way. And we have neurons in our body that are able to pick up on the feelings and emotions that other people are expressing. And then we, in turn, because they're mirror neurons, are able to feel those sensations that that person's experiencing. It's empathy, right? So we see someone feeling hurt, we feel hurt for them. That's the mirror neuron at work. But if you have a history of adversity, trauma, abuse, dysfunction in childhood, you're more prone to tap into someone else's trauma. You're more prone to connect with that trauma. And so if you've got that history yourself and you're listening to someone else's trauma come through, it becomes overwhelming too. Because remember, overwhelm is not being able to manage the emotions. And so it's almost like someone else's trauma washes over you. That stress response is already heightened, and picking up on someone else's emotions becomes so overcoming that it really does wash over you, and you start to experience it yourself all over again. So there is a connection between what we're experiencing and how we have these sensitivities in listening to other people and their trauma experiences. And then there are these people-pleasing behaviors. And there is some connection between people that have experienced adversity in childhood, particularly not feeling loved or feeling neglected in childhood, and people-pleasing behaviors. There are also other reasons that people experience and engage in people-pleasing behaviors. But the key thing to people-pleasing is you're taking care of other people at your own expense. And that's one of my mantras. Is I will not take care of other people at my own expense. Because guess what? I check this off on my list too. And so taking care of other people at your own expense means that you're doing things for them. You're taking on tasks. You're saying yes, please. You're engaging in perfectionism because you're constantly trying to do something for someone else. It's striving. It's not managing your own stress because you're taking on other responsibilities. And pretty soon you feel stretched out, exhausted, like you're running out of steam, and you just don't see a way out. And so that seems to go hand in hand with overwhelm, right? That you're taking on for other people and doing for other people things that they could do for themselves, but you're making it your job and your responsibility. And that goes hand in hand with relapse triggers because you're getting further and further away from your own recovery, your own support, your own personal recovery activities, and you're not focusing on the things that you need to do first things first. So if you're focusing on perfectionism, if you're feeling stuck and isolated, if you're feeling angry, lonely, and tired, and maybe not feeding yourself because you're so busy and you don't have time to eat, you can't see a solution or a way out, you're enabling other people, you're not managing your stress, it's tied in hand together. And so you feel like you've got to do all these things and you can't take care of yourself and you don't have time for your recovery. And so you don't take care of your recovery. And that's a red flag for your own relapse. Sorry about that. So then we can turn to the big book that doesn't speak to overwhelm, but does speak to the fact that we don't have to experience these things alone. We don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. We don't have to carry burdens for ourselves and for other people. We can overcome them. And that God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free, and not walk through a life in the vale of tears. I love these quotes because the answer is we can step back and we can look at the situation that we're in and realize that we don't have to do this the way that we're doing it. We don't have to experience all the stress and the overwhelm and the burden by ourselves. That's us creating a fortress of pain and harm and hurt for ourselves that we're only self-perpetuating. And so if we can get out of this cycle, if we can take a step back and get back to the basics, then we're going to be able to come up with some solutions and address our overwhelm. So let's look at some solutions. First, stop and breathe. And I know that you've probably heard this a million times before, but the key here is twofold. One, stop. Just stop for a second. When you're doing so much and trying to take care of other people and trying to do so many tasks and trying to be responsible and saying yes to everything, get off the merry-go-round. If you get off the merry-go-round, you can get some perspective. In the meantime, if you take a deep breath and trigger your abdominal breathing, so belly breathing, then you can actually get in touch with your vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve is what we have passed down from our reptilian ancestors. And so I want you to just picture a lizard sunning on a rock. Still, quiet, not moving. It has a vagus nerve running from its brain all the way down to its tail. And that's what keeps it calm. And that's what we're trying to trigger with our abdominal breathing or our belly breathing. We're trying to push into that vagus nerve that runs from our brain all the way down to our bottom of our spinal cord so that our abdomen can slow us down, can calm us down. And if you grew up with adversity, if you grew up with that broken stress reduction gene, you're going to re-engage that by touching your vagus nerve through abdominal breathing. And so it's just taking a few slow breaths that are intentional so that you can come up for air afterwards and recognize, I can say no. I don't have to do this. I can take a moment and breathe and see a little more clearly. I also think about babies when I think about abdominal breathing, because all of their breathing is coming from their abdominal muscles. And if you think about a baby laying on their back, smiling and laughing, they're using all of those abdominal muscles to push up their breath. And so we want to be happy. We want to be joyous. We want to be free. Babies are like that. So that is something that you can tap into. Next, it's a twofer. Walk away and set boundaries. So walking away is that same idea of stop, breathe, and then get out. And I don't say that lightly, I mean that literally. Get away from your desk, get away from the kitchen, get away from the trigger, get away from all the stuff, go somewhere else. Maybe it's walking outside, maybe it's walking into the bathroom, maybe it's walking into a different location so that you can literally get a new perspective on what's going on. For me, it took a lot to recognize that taking a nap for 15 minutes in my car before I could drive home was not the way to life satisfaction and professional success. Really, that was me feeling overwhelmed. I had to walk away from that situation and learn how to do things differently. Walking away doesn't mean that you're not going to take care of the tasks. It just means that you've got a better perspective on what the problems are and how to manage those tasks. And then set boundaries. That might mean saying no to certain people. That might mean for folks that typically you would be engaged in people-pleasing behaviors with, you're going to buy some time and say, let me check my schedule and see if that works. And then you can say no eventually. But it gives you a little bit of space to tell someone, this doesn't work for me. And remember, you're not going to take care of someone else at your own expense. So how are you going to engage in that boundary and set that boundary? Maybe it's just giving it a certain amount of time for a task. Maybe it means that if you're working on some project that you're only going to spend 2 hours on that project before getting up, walking away, and doing something else. Or maybe it means you're only going to spend a week on that project. Or if you have a family obligation, maybe it means you're only going to spend 4 hours with that family obligation before you go do something else. Set those boundaries, make them achievable, make them succinct so you can adhere to them. And this is one of my favorites. This is portion your plate, which gives the idea that if you could remove 1 or 2 things from your plate that are causing you 80% of your stress, what would those things be? Now, maybe you can't get things off of your plate. Maybe you can't remove them entirely, but just looking at what's causing you stress is another way of giving you perspective to look at how can I accomplish that? How can I be successful with that? So if there's a project that's taking up 80% of your stress, then can you finish that project? Can you put all of your focus and attention on that project to finish it? Or can you maybe delegate and ask someone else for help? Or can you time box, which means give a certain amount of time to that task and then go on to something else? It's just the perspective of being able to have a helicopter view of what's causing you stress, what's taking up your time, what's giving you overwhelming feelings and overwhelming sensations, and then trying to manage them a little bit more practically. The other thing that you can do, and this is recommended in the book Chatter by Ethan Kross, is encourage yourself to get through your tasks by talking to yourself in third person. So for me, it would be saying, Stephanie, you can do this. Stephanie, you've got this. Stephanie, it's okay. And there's a real chemistry that's going on when we talk to ourselves in third person and kind of cheer ourselves on to be able to get that distance of encouragement to allow us to get through some of these tasks and some of these chores. So maybe you identify what's causing you stress, what's taking up so much of your time, and then encourage yourself by talking to yourself in third person to help you get it done. So what do these look like? These are character defects. And character defects are not assumptions, but character defects are things that start to bleed into overwhelm. They're the things that take the reins when overwhelm starts to take control. And so when we get really busy, when we feel like we're the only ones that can accomplish a task, when we're denying our ability to focus on our recovery because we're working so much, all of these things take the reins in the midst of overwhelm. And so we've got to be really cautious about what we're giving away when we're engaging in overwhelm. And we also have to challenge our assumptions about ourselves, because when we feel like we're the only ones that are responsible, we're the only ones that can accomplish a task, when we feel like it's not going to get done if we don't do it, that no one else is going to be there to pick up the pieces, or no one else is going to take our family member shopping, or no one else is going to be able to watch our kids or our pets or cut the grass. We're putting ourselves at the forefront. And that assumption only adds to our stress and adds to our strain and adds to our overwhelm. And we've got to get out of the way. Because sometimes putting ourselves at the forefront and making those assumptions that are putting us at the center prevent us from seeing other solutions and getting out of the overwhelm. And that's why I think it's really important to look at ways that we can get out of the way. You know, we can practice humility. We can ask for help. We can look at other solutions to get the same job done, because maybe someone else can cut the grass. Maybe someone else can take a family member to the grocery store. Maybe someone else can take on those responsibilities. And maybe it's not going to be as good as you would do, but it's going to get done. And it doesn't have to center on you. So challenge your own assumptions that you are the only one that can accomplish these tasks. And then finally, seek connection. So this is what's so critical and so wonderful about overwhelm and recovery. One, you don't have to deal with it by yourself. Two, there's an automatic support system that gets built in so that you don't have to feel isolated, lonely, or afraid of what you're going to have to face. Overwhelm can be isolating, it can be lonely, it can be frightening, but you don't have to deal with it alone. You can reach out and ask for help. You can reach out and talk to people about what you're experiencing and get their perspective. Have them tell you that you don't have to do all these things by yourself. You can ask for help. Go out and reach out to your recovery community, to your sponsor, to your networks, and get some perspective. Get out of your head where you're making those assumptions that it's only you. And other people will say, yeah, you need to stop thinking that way. That's not doing you any good, and it's not doing anyone else any good. Ask for help. Talk to people about what you're experiencing. Make those connections, because if we can connect with other people, we're no longer going to feel isolated. And if we're not isolated, we can come up with solutions to help reduce our overwhelm. Because when we feel so stuck, when we feel less creative, when we don't have capacity, when we don't ask for help because we've given away our agency, there is a solution. So I really am grateful for Pavillon for letting me share. I want to hear from you all, if we have time, about what comes up for you, what some of these strategies might be that you've practiced or you've experienced, and also see if there's some new strategies that we haven't talked about here for setting boundaries, for giving space before making decisions, and not for saying yes to everything, but putting recovery first and focusing on what we need to do to take care of ourselves. Thank you for sharing that. And it's just so, you know, we grow up in this environment where these behaviors are modeled for us. And then, you know, we develop this people-pleasing behavior because we don't want to see someone that we love suffer. But then you get this genetic composition of our stress reduction gene is broken because of what we've seen and because of what we've witnessed. And so our own ability to reduce stress is broken until we do something different. I think that's what's so tough about all of this. But it's fixable. It's until we do something different. Stepping away is critical. And I think that there's kind of a value too in, if we don't see our perspective shift. So when we step away to take care of our children or our pets or whatever, things that we really love doing and we really have joy in doing, if we step away and we start to feel resentful, that's also a red flag that you're feeling overwhelmed. You know, if the things that you loved doing are causing you to feel resentful about doing those things, then there's still value in stepping away. You see it, you can own it, you can name it, but now we've got to do something about it. And so that's where we can, take those breaths, or we can look at how can I reorganize my time so that I can really get back to finding joy and gratitude and appreciation for the things that I love. Because I wanna love taking my dogs out, and I wanna love nature and not feel like it's a chore. And the only thing that's gonna change there is your brain. Those thoughts between your ears are the only things that are gonna change, and that's when we have to make those changes ourselves. Thanks for talking about that, because I think that is a struggle. It's a real struggle, and it's not a you alone struggle. What I think about when I hear that and when I experience that is how much of the feelings are real and how much do I need to kind of check them with someone else. So with my husband, if I'm working, I can assume that he thinks that I'm overworking or I'm doing too much and not giving enough time for him. The only way for me to know that is to check in with him and have regular check-ins with him. How is this going? How are things going? Are we making enough intentional time together? I need to focus on me. It's oxygen mask first. And then once I've got my oxygen mask on, I can be better present to be available and be happy with you and with the rest of my family. But I think there's a balance between is it real or is it perceived? And the only way to check on that is have that conversation. And then through having that conversation and checking in with the other person, figure out what's going to work. What's really going to be a balance? If you know that you've got 6 hours of meetings a week and those are set in stone, then how do you make intentional time with your family that they know that's also going to be set in stone? So I'll put my email in the chat. And one thing that just keeps coming to mind, and I want to express my gratitude to each of you and to the Pavillon for allowing me to be here, but we spent an hour together holding space, so whatever capacity limitations we might have, whatever other constraints that we might have on our time, we just spent an hour together. So we did it, we carved it out. That overwhelm didn't encroach this space, I hope. So thank you all for that. But I'll put my email in the chat, and I'd love to connect with you all.